Well, welcome everybody. I'm Matt Sugarbaker. I work at Hacker, and I had the privilege of working on this project through it the whole time it was going on in the office. So I've given a few presentations about it. I was sort of the principal in charge of technical um, expertise on how to put the building together, but obviously I was involved in a lot of design stuff. But the main principal designer was Corey Martin. If people know Corey, this was his project. But when we first were approached, hold on, it's not advancing.
Oh, maybe we should have tested that too.
There it goes. We don't need to do the continuing education stuff since Kathy already did that. When we were first approached by the client, they were a group of friends and family that lived in town in Portland and traveled together and hung out together and been sort of that close knit group for a long time. And they really started to talk about how do we keep doing this as we grow older? How do we grow old together? And like this was sort of the word cloud that we at our first meeting discussed quite a bit. And that concept of how do we age together became very important. The main clients were two families that were the parents and the daughter, the McCabe's. And they were really the ones that drove most of this design. But they were like, how do we keep together and not, as we get aged, get isolated as people tend to in single family homes out in the suburbs or even in multifamily buildings where as you age, it tends to isolate you. And they were concerned about that. And so that question of how do we create that building, what's a building look like that supports that aging in place concept, but is also in a downtown, more urban, multifamily setting. So how does it feel like a single family home, but in a multifamily sort of density? The neighborhood they picked, and they came with this site, we didn't help them with site selection, was in the neighborhood of Portland, southeast Division Street, which is a very walkable, vibrant, multifamily, mixed use building or street. And it's about 10 blocks that have really densified over the years. And this was a site that just had a couple of single family homes on it. And over the years, they've been being replaced by these sort of 4-story buildings. But it means there's a lot of life, a lot of activity on the street, and they really liked the sort of walkability of this site. But what most buildings are, multifamily, sort of 4-story on this site, pretty dense, stacked in, not a lot of amenity. Most of them are really just, retail on the first floor, multifamily at the top, pretty efficient. Hacker has 3 buildings over on 33rd. This is on 28th. So we've done a lot of work on this street and saying that it's very efficient type of mixed use buildings. They wanted something a little different. Also, the fact that they were just doing 10 units, the program was just 10 multifamily units and some mixed use. We didn't need to use all the FAR on the site, all the floor area ratio. And so we had a lot of room to sculpt the 3-dimensional form. So how do we break down that scale? The drawing on the bottom right was one of the first sketches that Corey had done of how do you break that down in a different sort of way. One of the things they came with is when they vacation is sort of Greek hill cities and that how sort of connected they feel and how they're sort of, even though they're all these individual little buildings, how much they're visually and acoustically connected and very vibrant. And so that was a big inspiration for this building. And so we ended up looking at how do we sculpt this building back and sort of mimic the hill. Behind this neighborhood is a sort of big rolling hill, or behind this building, and how do we mimic that sort of hill geometry and connect these units unit to unit and be able to see each other and be able to interact, although have your own isolated single family home on one level that's easily accessible, but then be able to see all these other levels adjacent to you. Also have a lot of indoor, every space have their own private outdoor space was very important. So this was a way for us to break down that scale and give each space their own, each unit their own sort of private and semi-private outdoor space, as well as obviously their indoor space. And so that connectivity from terrace to terrace became really the sort of first um, concept of how do we connect these units in a different way um, than most multifamily buildings, so that your neighbor is a part of your life. As you're out on the deck and other people are on the deck, you can have those conversations, see each other, interact with each other in a more natural way than having to break through the inertia of going up and knocking on somebody's door and then interacting that they wanted something much more organic. But then also have spaces that were for coming together and connection, and we'll get into that in later slides. And so that connection also, they wanted to take it to the next level, which was you have all these terraces that are individual private units. The whole top floor is amenity, which we'll get into, but those terraces also then speak to the private terraces. And then also on the ground floor on the lower left, that retail space is meant for a restaurant, which I think they're in negotiations right now with someone to get in there. But having then a big patio space that's for the public, for that restaurant tenant, that also connects to those other spaces, those individual private spaces. And the entry to the building that's in the center here also then once again is part of that same community. And then that lobby was meant to be a public art gallery to showcase the family's artwork. And it has been over the last few years this roving or changing art gallery that was open to the public. Right now, it's actually showing artwork that people that in the building have created, but it was also saying artwork that they own. And so it's another way to like bring the public in and interact, have this building interact with the neighborhood and the public, and have a way to not make this building feel too isolated and bring in outsiders as well, but obviously in a controlled way. Um, the And then again, what I was saying before, the restaurant in this corner, the image in the lower right, is having this big outdoor space that the restaurant and big open sliding doors that this restaurant could spill out and have a really vibrant corner outdoor space, which most of the mixed use retail and restaurants that are on the street, most of them are lacking is any significant outdoor use. And so pulling back from the corner on this corner and trying to get that active use on was really important to them, and to help enliven the whole building and interact with the public in that way. So we're excited if somebody gets in there that see how that fleshes out. But so far we've been still looking for the right tenant. See, where am I? Oh, in the lower right here, that's the other retail. There's two small retail spaces, one of which is now the building manager's office, and the other one where they're still looking for a tenant, but also having some standard small retail spaces that could help inform that public interaction. So we were talking about the terraces mostly. I mean, that was a big driving factor in the shape and the form of the building. But the other thing this peeling back of the mass allowed the units to be is open on multiple sides. I mean, some of them are on the corners, but some of them aren't. And this peeling back also allowed the interior units to have access to light and air from at least two sides. Some of them have air to three sides, which is very unique and sort of multifamily density kind of building. And then having these spaces have outdoor space that's covered, outdoor space that's not covered, outdoor space that's sort of separate. We have this trellis that goes over part of the outdoor space that once the vines grow up a little bit more, they'll be very private. And so you have this sort of private outdoor space, and then you also get out into that more open, and you have the more open outdoor space. So trying to give multiple levels of privacy and use, indoor, outdoor, and trying to make it as seamless as possible. You can see here on this image, we did all the floors in engineered wood and the ceiling in the exact same wood, and then that ceiling spills out to the outside, trying to make, again, that little bit more seamless indoor outdoor space. Most of the windows are floor to ceiling for that same reason, and to try to help push light is far back into the building. But we didn't want to make it too transparent. You want to feel um, protected inside. They also really love artwork, the people that we were designing this for. So having some spaces and walls to have artwork displayed was very important to them. So that allowed us to break this down in more curated openings as opposed to big swaths of glass. To get into the program of the building, the first floor, like I said, is restaurant on the corner, retail space, and this sort of lobby gallery entry piece. That's all the sort of public facing, division street facing functions. It does have a below grade garage, which is very important to them from an accessibility point of view, that they wanted to be able to, as they age, to be able to park and get to the elevator very easily, one level, and which is why also all the units are on one level for helping with aging in place. But also having that secure garage, they have a place to park. It's secure and it's very, very accessible. So that's all the sort of public facing. And then we had 3 units that have outdoor entrances off this back alley, this sort of pedestrian alley. They have access inside the building as well, but they have their own front doors on this back alley that have access to both of the streets. The original intent of these 3 units was to rent to whomever in the short term, and in the long term, if as they're aging in place, if they needed caretakers and people that were live-in caretakers for the tenants, that they could use these units. So they're a little different, they're a little smaller, but they also wanted them to feel a little more independent, which is why they have the outdoor entrances. So they don't feel as embedded, but they could be adjacent for if they're doing caretaking. Right now, they're just friends that live in the units and are part of the overall building. As you move up to the second level, it's just 4 units, and each with a terrace, each with their own space. Some of them, most of the units are 2-bedroom. There's a 3-bedroom on the next floor, which we'll see. You also see that some space carved off the corridor to be some more sort of gathering space on the residential level, which we'll see some pictures later of that as well. Third floor is the bigger units. These were the main 2 families, and then a third unit, but the main 2 on Division Street were the main 2 clients, or those 2 units. And then the 4th floor is all amenity. So this is the shared floor that everyone in the building, all 10 units, share this floor. And it was important for them to have multiple spaces so that you could have multiple people up here and not have to be together, but also places that they could all gather and all enjoy. So big common kitchen and dining area with a big multi-pane sliding door that opens up to a terrace, sort of fireside lounge and more quiet space, a game room, indoor swim spa and a hot tub outside, a gym, and then also a treatment room off of the gym for healthcare to come into the building that can close off and be able to use a space in the building to help with future healthcare needs. So when we got sort of through the design part of it, then it became, well, how are we putting this thing together, right? So it's a lot going on, a lot of shapes, a lot of interesting waterproofing, things like that. So what we decided was post-tension concrete building for the first 3 floors, really all the floors that have terraces, and we're doing significant green roofs or terraces or things like that. And then we did mass timber for the top floor to expose that some wood. We had concepts to do the whole building in mass timber, but with all the terracing and the waterproofing details, they felt it more prudent to do some concrete and some wood. It's a type 5A building, which is this is a very quintessentially type 5 building, which means it's made out of anything, and we chose to make it out of a little of everything. So it's some metal studs, some wood studs, some mass timber, concrete. It's a little all over the place. But it was what we needed, where we needed it, and that's what we used. But having it as a type 5 building was really helpful for that. From a systems point of view, it was all ducted VRF, which is not standard multifamily, right? Obviously comfort was high on their list. And so we were also trying to be very efficient. So it's all VRF system ducted with energy recovery units in each unit to recover that heating and cooling. A lot of coordination on this with a concrete slab and pretty small floor to floor. We were really hacking these ceilings with stuff. So it was a big effort. And of course, with the shape you saw, nothing lines up from floor to floor for the most part, because everything steps back from floor to floor. So only certain walls can actually line up. It's not a stacking kind of building, which is the other reason we did concrete, to allow for that shifting of program as it moved up. Building also has a generator in the basement because they had significant emergency power desires in the units, way more than just emergency lighting and things like that. Actually, every unit has dedicated outlets for if they have equipment or say medical needs, and outlets in bedrooms and living rooms that were on emergency power. So the emergency power for a building seems like a relatively small building. It was actually a decent sized generator because quite a bit of the building is on emergency power. But that was part of the aging in place and not knowing what type of medical needs they would need or equipment that was going to be in buildings, and having some peace of mind that the building could handle whatever they throw at it as they live in it for years and years. For the outside, we were trying to make it out of something that could really help with the main concept, be something that was durable and long lasting, something that had required very little maintenance, but also, like I said, supported the concept. And so we ended up with this fluted terracotta system, integral color, that changes how it looks as the sun moves and as it changes. This warm color, inviting to touch, interesting shape. You're really next to this cladding quite a bit since there's so many outdoor spaces. And so we wanted something that was warm and dynamic and ever changing and sort of mimicked the natural sort of biophilic, patterns and shadows that plants and other things give, and something that would, every time you look out, would feel just a little bit different. But we didn't want to have it too crazy custom. So this whole building is made of 4 shapes. Everything in the whole building, it's just these 4 shapes on the bottom left. 2 straight shapes and 2 corner shapes. And everything is just different lengths of those same 2 shapes. But it meant that this building is on a very strict module. So it's not like other siding materials where you can I'm just going to trim up this panel a little bit. You can't do that with any of these. So every corner, every window, every joint had to be very meticulously followed and lining up on what the module of the system is. So during design and construction, it was all about what's terracotta want, what it wants, that's what we do. So it was very, the contractor Trubeck Construction really bought into that and really pushed it. And we had virtually no busts as far as dimensions, and it went together really smoothly. But that wasn't from lack of effort. That's trying to make a building just out of these 4 shapes. You have to really follow the rules. And it's on its own. This is a company called Shilden Terracotta Rain Screen System, and they have their own cladding support system. So they were highly involved in design and construction on designing this cladding support system, making sure it worked with our windows and the metal stud backup walls, and making sure we get them out on site and make it work. They're also very easy to clip on and off the building. And so we gave the owner a good overstock of panels. Since there's only 4, it's pretty easy to, and there's only the vertical shapes. There's a few different sizes of vertical, dimensions. So we gave them a good stock of the shapes that are on the building. So if any damage happens in the future, that'd be easy to replace without having to go back to Shilden for more panels. They're also very naturally graffiti resistant. But even that on the first floor, we did a light wax coating, this spray-on wax coating on the first floor to even help further with graffiti resistance, because this neighborhood is pretty notorious for getting tagged, and so we wanted it to be easy to maintain and easy to clean up. And we did a lot of tests of trying to spray paint these panels and see how they go and how easy it is to clean them off. And I was very pleased with how that went. Um, but on the inside, we also on this top floor, we talked about it, having these, a big part of aging in place was having these active spaces that you want to go hang out in, and you're going to interact with the people in the building. And so this is on the left is the gym, has its own patio outside it. The game room on the right, which has the ability to close off, so it can be acoustically more separated. The lap pool was a lot of detailing. Having a pool on the fourth floor of a building is always an interesting technical exercise. But having these two pools adjacent, and then we have a big equipment room that's around the corner. But these are um, uh, on a pedestal paver system walkway, so that even if water gets out, we can then collect that water up and take it away. So this whole room could get wet, and it's no big deal. And then in the gym, like I was saying before, it also has this alcove off the gym that's usually open to the gym, but it can be closed off with this multi-paneled wall system to be a treatment room, so that if they do have healthcare providers coming to the building to do in-home healthcare, they have a space they can use for that purpose that has a sink and support and space enough for them to use and feel private, and not have to feel like they have to do it in their home, but still have some space that they can do that work. Other spaces on the top floor that are the more quiet spaces is the fireside lounge with the mass timber ceiling. Um, and this is another big sort of hangout space for the whole building. The elevator is just off to the left that you can't see, and the pool is at the end of the hallway. Um, and then the really big gathering space, people that live in this building are really big about gathering around food. And so that was a really big part of that space became very important. So this big table for everyone to gather at, and a big sort of common kitchen. And then this big multi-panel door that opens up that wall. And then there's seating outside under a big trellis and a big fire pit area outside. So they can all sort of gather and eat and play music and hang out and have a space that was meant for that on a more day-to-day basis. Um, my one big regret on this building is we were building it during the pandemic and not delivering it right before the pandemic, because it would have been the perfect building for everyone to be stuck inside on. And instead, we were trying to build it while the pandemic was going on, which was significantly challenging with subcontractors and people showing up and having meetings and getting things to work. But the idea was, before the pandemic happened, they were having that same ideas. They wanted that small pod of people to share those spaces that they felt comfortable and safe around. And this room is really the heart of that experience for what they wanted in the sort of coming together and community in the building. And then this was the that little alcove off of the hallway, so you can see like the unit entries. We try to make the unit entries very warm and inviting, each individual, but also then have these breakout spaces. So even if you're just coming from the elevator to your unit, you might pass by your neighbors that are hanging out on the hallway and stop and talk and interact and not feel so isolated. Obviously, on a building like this, the amount of amenities for the amount of units is very atypical. They're saying, I gave a presentation to developers a few weeks ago on this project. This building meets no pro forma sort of typical, right? It doesn't hit the full build out for the site. It's 10 units for 50,000 square foot building. Underground garage that only has 16 spaces. Like, it is very much a different beast than most multifamily projects. But it did allow us to have this and much more connective experience as they lived in a more dense environment. And then they really wanted to be part of this neighborhood. So this is this division street. And they're saying over the years, they're still saying single family homes on it, but over the years, they've been torn down and then very much more this dense sort of urban mixed use neighborhood has come up. And they're mostly these 4-story boxes. So they really wanted to break that down. So it opened up the street a little bit more on this side, but also on the other side, you can see the 4th floor doesn't go all the way to the back. They were trying to break down that scale on the neighborhood side. Once you get past these single family homes, all on the other side of this arterial street in Portland. And so they were really also trying to break down that scale so that the back of the building was really more or less the same height as the roofs of the single family homes in the neighborhood. And so the allowance for us to have a little bit more freedom on the massing from a pro forma point of view really helped us sculpt, I think, a mass of a project that fits way more into the context of this neighborhood, addresses this corner in a much more elegant way, in a much more civic way, and also doesn't feel too oppressive to the small homes that are directly adjacent to it, behind it, but is also allowing for the next building next to it that's going to be another 4-story box, sort of making that feel contextual as well. So how does this building be that transition between this 4-story mass and the 2-story neighborhood? And I think it did a really good job. And that's all I had for the presentation. So I went a little bit quicker. If anyone has any questions, we need to flesh out another 10 minutes for Kathy to make sure this hit the 40-minute mark. So.
Hi, I do have one question. Maybe you said and I missed it. Were these built as apartments or condos? And I'm curious if all 10 were accounted for with the initial friends and family group that hired you.
Yeah, they were built as apartments by the main 2 families, by the parents and the daughter. Those 2 families built it as their building that are apartments, and then they were managing all of the whatever contractual they were doing with all the other families. It's since then changed into a different project property manager situation. I mean, they're still in the building, but it has a different configuration, but it's always been apartments. That was the way we designed it. So we didn't have to work with all 10 families. That the other 2 families were like our filter to them, right? And there's a lot of commonality from unit to unit. So not every unit is super custom. I mean, custom from one to another. They're different shapes, but the kitchens have a lot of similar, the appliances are very similar package. So that was very important for them to not make it too ultra custom, from unit to unit.
Maybe a way to add a minute. What I was kind of curious looking at the floor plans were I love how it steps back. I live right next to this building. And I didn't realize the inspiration was like Grease Hills. So that's fun for a flat site to kind of mimic that. I noticed, the thickened, obviously the shear walls around the elevator and stair core, but then the secondary stair not. I'm curious, you talked about the mechanical coordination through penetrations with no wall stacking, but maybe a little bit more about structurally where I like shear,
sure.
especially with exterior walls, because there's not much wall stacking.
We did, we did all the shear on that stair elevator core. Every bit of it is in that one core. Yeah, it's a really thick wall. It's doing a lot of job. And then the other stair is just a framed up braided stair. I mean, it's not doing anything special, but yeah, those 2 thick wall tubes you see in the middle are doing all the shear. And then you can see around it, there's a bunch of shafts around that are the main vertical connectiveness that do connect all the way through the building. Because as this building steps back, obviously we can't really have any shafts on the south of the building because it keeps moving on you, right? And even on that, we can't really have them on the north of the building because it moves back when you get to the 4th floor. So this sort of middle stair core was our main vertical hearth of the building that was shear, mechanical vertical circulation, all the vertical penetrations were done through that. I mean, obviously there's little penetrations all over the place, but the main sort of trunk lines of everything.
I have 2 different questions. How occupied is it? Is
It's
one, and kind of when
full.
it's full.
Yep.
And then you talked quite a bit about, or not quite a bit, you talked about the mechanical systems and getting everything in the ceiling and it was tight. How about access to it if there's a problem to the mechanical or electrical in the
We have,
ceiling?
yeah, we have quite a few. We tried to put the equipment in places that weren't that wood ceiling so that we could do access panels and be able to remove the entire piece of equipment. But even where we have the wood ceilings, we came up with this very slick lift out access panels that are the mod of the wood. So the wood is the seams. And so you don't even see them. So there's tons of access panels throughout the wood ceiling that if you know where they are, you just go up and you push up and a whole section of the ceiling just lifts out and you can get to, like we have quite a few dry sprinkler heads that face the terraces and you need access panels for those. So there's little access panels all through the south on the wood. There's a few mixing boxes and things like that for the VRF that we needed access panel for that ended up in the wood ceilings. But most of the equipment we pushed into closets and bathrooms, or mostly closets, that we could lower the ceiling down a little bit more, have room for the equipment, have a really big sort of gypboard access panel that you could lift a big section out of the way, pull the whole equipment out and replace it if you had to. So we were thinking quite a bit about access. But if you had to get back to redo a bunch of ductwork, you'd be ripping into some of the ceiling. But
Yeah.
hopefully you would never have to do that.
The detailing and coordination for the whole project is unbelievable. And
Yeah.
you did an amazing job, exterior and that kind of thing too, with access in the ceiling.
Yeah, and if you think about every terrace is over a really important space below it that has no walls. It's like the big open living room usually, right? So then we have roof drains and overflows and like all that stuff that has to like get out of the way. Like we spend a lot of time working on BIM coordination, like Navisworks, 3D modeling, and clash detection. Like we did a lot of pre-work with the contractor to get it worked out. And I would say we had 98% of the things figured out, and then we had 2% of in the field like, oh, what's going on with XYZ, and that we had to like figure out on the fly. But we had most of this building dialed in from an MEP point of view. It was all design build. So we had the trade partners on really early, and they were doing drawings really early during design, and that was really helpful to help with knowing what it is, like really what it is, how its pieces are going to go together, and then there wasn't that big moment of going from design to construction where they're like, none of this is going to work, and you need to lower all your ceilings. Which we, as architects, we've never heard anyone say that before. Yeah. And so I was involved very heavily in that, being sort of technical lead on the project, and I'm very pleased to how that turned out.
Yeah, great job.
And it's a highly efficient system too, so that I'm very pleased about that. Because saying most, at least at the time, most multifamily projects weren't even, the code wasn't pushing us into doing ERVs yet. Like that's a more current code things. Like this was really ahead of its time from a code point of view, and so it was nice to get into that more sophisticated, high efficiency systems on a multifamily project. I say now it's becoming more common just because the code's pushing us that way.
Can you see the chat?
I can't.
Okay, so Leslie just put a question in the chat. Are the individual units metered for electricity, and how did you break up the cost of the large VRF serving all the units?
The units are individually metered, but obviously the large VRFs are shared, and so because it was like one client that was then contracting with the people down. I'm not sure how they worked that out, if they're just making them pay a flat fee or they're doing some sort of prorated thing month to month. They sort of like, we'll do that on our own. And now there's a building manager, so they're probably doing all that. But we didn't split up the VRF, right? Because it is just two units that are running this whole building, public space, private space, like all of it. But the units are individually metered, and obviously the retail spaces are obviously individually metered as well. And we provided, so they're going to have their own systems, the retail spaces on the roof. So we provided space for those to happen on the roof, and shafts for the retail spaces, and a grease shaft for the restaurant space. So they're going to have their own equipment on the roof, and then their own electrically metered. So they'll be able to isolate very easily. But the units, there was more of a communal approach to divvying up power and how it's going to be paid for. So same thing with gas. We didn't talk about gas, but there's gas cooktops in all the units, and gas like outdoor grill and fire pit and things like that, and the fireplaces. And every unit has a fireplace. Like I said, there's a lot of gas in the building too, and that's all communal as well. So they'll have to figure out how to divvy that up.
Okay, Tobin asked, did you mention who the contractor was?
It was Trubeck. I said it a couple times, but yeah, Trubeck Construction. We had a different, and kudos to Trubeck on this note. We had Siteworks was the contractor all during design, and then at the last minute, the owner switched to Trubeck, and so they had to come on, and within like 3 weeks, break ground, which was a little rough. We ported over all the subcontractors, but the general contractor switched, which was a little challenging. But they stepped up and did a good job.
Steve says, great project, love it. What would you do differently?
What would I do differently? It's a good question. Not much. Yeah, not much. I think we ended up having, from a cost point of view, and I didn't show very many pictures of this side, probably because of this, the whole north side of the building is Ceraclad as opposed to the terracotta. Now, obviously, I don't have the say in can I do this differently. I would have loved the whole building to be the same material. I think the Ceraclad turned out nice, and it's simpler, and it's a little more flat over there, and it is a little bit more residential. You don't get the benefits of the light on the north side with the fluted terracotta, but I would have loved to have seen that be the same material, just to keep that sort of pure one material for the whole building. Like I said, I'm pleased how it turned out, but I would have been much more pleased if we would have been able to afford the terracotta, even like simpler flat terracotta, but not, not the fluted stuff or something. But I would have loved to have been the same materiality, because people are walking on that side. I mean, like it has, like I said, has this space that walks, goes around both sides. So you're walking right next to the building. And I just would have loved that to have been that warmer, more tactile terracotta experience as you're walking down that pedestrian alley in the back.
Lori asks, what's the average square footage of each unit?
That is a good question. The residential area is 31,000 square feet, and there's 10 units, but there's really small units and there's really big units. Like this 1-bedroom unit on the corner on this floor is a little different than the 2-bedroom unit 10, which is this whole side. That unit's pretty large. So they're pretty big, but they're also pretty small. But yeah, I would say they're in the probably average on these big units. They're in the 2,000 square foot average. They're pretty big. These on the second floor are a little smaller, but saying that really these two, unit 9 and unit 10, are enormous. And they both have 2 terraces, and they're really, really big units.
Any more questions? We got to fill 2 more minutes, guys. So we're legal.
Bunch of people weren't on when Jean on call asked me this question. I was going to share it, but she cut to the chase. Ellen Browning, the name of the building, it's named after Ellen Browning Scripps, who was a big philanthropist in Southern California, La Jolla, in the the late 1800s and early 1900s, and set up tons of foundations and organizations down there that have Scripps as part of it. They were big newspaper owners and owned a bunch of stuff back in the day. And she is the family, the McCabe's, are related to Ellen Browning Scripps, and so and they really respect her and and the work she did in the community, and so they wanted to name the building after her. So that's where Ellen Browning, the name, came from.
Was solar considered?
What's that?
Was solar considered? Solar energy?
We talked about it a bit, and certainly the structurally were set if they ever wanted to do it, but they didn't want to do it as first build. But we are solar ready as far as conduit locations to the roof, and structurally designed to handle that load. That mass timber is actually quite stout for handling that. And it has great southern exposure. So they could add arrays on this roof very easily at any point. But it wasn't part of the initial budget. It was a pretty spendy project to start with. So it just didn't make the cut as far as that. But you could see on this roof plan, we have pretty big swaths that you could get some solar up on this roof, and we kept the mechanical really tight as we could.
We've got, and are you able to share the cost per square foot?
Yeah, it was just a smidge over $400 a square foot, 408. So it was this is in 2000, right? When they signed the GMP. And so, or 2020 when they signed the GMP. And I would say we had finished a project just down the street called Artisan. If anyone's familiar with Portland, it's on 33rd and Division. It sort of hit the market maybe 6 months before this one, and that one was coming in at like 210. So it is almost twice the sort of going market rate multifamily apartment building cost. Not quite twice, but really close. But saying most projects don't have a full basement parking. That was pretty expensive. The terracotta is obviously not terribly cheap. All being PT concrete pushed it up. So there was quite and then the shape obviously adds some cost. But yeah, 408 square foot.
You've already answered the solar. Was there a landscape architect on the project?
Yeah, it was Zabo Landscape Architecture out of Bend. Was the landscape. Vega Civil Engineering, and DCI was the structural engineer. And then we did the majority of, we did all the outside and quite a bit of the interiors and the inside, but the owner had another consultant for some interior work, Garrison Hullinger. I couldn't remember their name. And so we worked closely with them on a few of the amenity spaces.
Interesting. Zabo was actually part of several of the entries for this year's awards. So
yeah, we use them quite a bit, particularly anything we do in Bend. We exclusively almost use them, but they were really interested in this project, and so I was really pleased with the work they did on this one, because they're saying that we have extensive green roofs. You don't see it, but that when we pull back the building on the 4th floor, that whole north side is extensive green roof. We have all these planters, and then like on that back walkway, that alleyway, there's tons of planting to sort of soften that up on that edge too. So it's for a small project, it had a lot of landscape scope. So they did a really good job.
Krista asks, would the solar PV be ballasted on the roof or structurally anchored into roof diaphragm / CLT?
You could do either. I mean, obviously that we didn't put in a stanchions as part of the project, to do it super easy, but it would be very easy because it's all mass timber CLT roof. You could cut holes in that roof and really attach anywhere. And then obviously you just have to then boot back the TPO roof back to those stanchions. And so we didn't do any of that because it is so flexible of where they could do attachments for PV, being the 3-ply CLT roof that it is.
So Michael asks, in the summer of 2008, I sublet the attic bedroom of an old house on this project site. Does the grandfather me access to the attic pool in 2026?
I have no say in that. So, yeah, and the people that live here really love it. Like I said, and they said the fact that every unit is rented. The family and friends, I think, only take up about half of the building, and they end up renting to strangers, which I bet you are not strangers now. You know,
Yeah.
the way the building is. But it's fully rented. I have no idea what it rents for. I haven't seen like what the prices are. I'm sure it's not cheap though. It's they're really nice spaces, and the amenity is. I can't think of another building that has, amenities like this as far as multifamily goes.
Yeah. Was exterior insulation included in the wall assemblies?
It was, yeah. So we did a hybrid. So there is insulation on the walls as well, but we had 2.5 inches of exterior insulation, mineral wool, in the cladding support system. You can kind of see it in. Oop, going the wrong way. There's one picture I have of that brown stuff. That's all the exterior insulation. But we also had insulation in the wall cavity, so it was a breathable membrane, sort of hybrid insulation wall system. We were looking for every bit of insulation we could in the wall, because we were trying to shoot a little bit over code for overall R value, which I don't remember what we hit off the top of my head, but it was significantly over code minimum. And the windows, I did talk about the windows. They're all fiberglass, Cascadia fiberglass windows, very highly efficient frames and glazing. And listen, it's a very tight thermal building.
Okay, well, does anyone else have any other questions? All right. Well, thank you so much, Matt.
You're welcome. Always love to share
This is a
buildings that I
beautiful
loved
building.
working on. So
Good job.
Thank you.
And
yeah, thank you, everybody. It's a good turnout. Appreciate everyone showing up.
Thanks, Kathy.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy, for wrangling me and what
and
we did and being flexible on the dates. That worked out really well.
I do want to remind everyone once more that we do have a couple procrastinators days coming up tomorrow and the next day, just in case you need to get any more CE besides this one. And then remember to go to your holiday parties. I've put the events link in the chat if anyone cares, and we'll see you all next time.
Thanks, everybody.